So good morning. Thanks for being here. Let me ask you all, when you speak, to please speak into the mic, because this is being live streamed, so that the people out there who are following us have a chance to hear what you're saying. So, and welcome those in the audience with us today. I'm Tom Griscom. I'm here as the moderator for today's discussion. I'm going to start with my left and go around, starting with Juvenile Court Judge Rob Filial, Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Brian Johnson, our County Mayor, Jim Coppinger, our County Sheriff, Jim Hammond, Don Mueller, who is the CEO of the Erlanger Children's Institute or Hospital Outreach. So thank you for letting us be here today, Don. This is a great facility and a great addition to the community, so thank you. And Dr. Dave Buck, who is with the Chattanooga Autism Center as the Executive Director. So with that, Mayor, I'm going to start with you and ask you, what is the responsibility of county government when it comes to public education for its citizens?
Well, thank you for that question, Tom. You know, people should know that the primary function, the number one thing that we're responsible for in Hamilton County General Government is public education. We fund about 61 to 65% of our money goes for education. I happen to think it's a good spend, and it's our responsibility to get the resources to the Department of Education so they can educate our young people.
And so when the school board approves a budget and comes to you, is that an important part of this process?
Oh, it's an extremely important part because it shows that it has the support of the school board after Dr. Johnson or the superintendent has presented their budget. Again, it's them signing off that it's the right direction, what they want to be doing.
So Brian, what's been the progress to date when you look at the school system that you now lead?
Yeah, so first I'd start with commending our school board. I think when they sought to hire a superintendent, they had really clearly articulated the direction they wanted to go and the expectations that they had. Obviously, we've laid out a strategic plan that has key performance indicators underneath it. All of our schools have action plans that are aligned to that strategic plan. We were meeting this morning with senior leadership about how do we rev that work up. And, you know, when we look specifically at achievements, we started our budget last year about $5.5 million below the base budget of the previous year. And in the midst of all that, we still saw academic improvement. So the first time since 2013-14, the system met the state's expectation in regard to student academic growth. Graduation rates were the highest that they've been since 12-13. 17 of our schools were reward schools, which means they met the highest level in all the areas. And we had 25 schools that were level 5 schools, which is the highest level for student academic growth. And so, we're very proud of the work that our teachers and our leaders are doing, and obviously all of that starts with the board having a very clear vision, and then me trying to carry forth that vision throughout the system.
So if we look at your budget, how do we do things, or what have you identified that helps a teacher do what they're trained to do? The students who graduate from UTC, they become teachers in Hamilton County schools. What are we doing to make sure the teachers are in there to teach?
Absolutely. So, you know, the reality is we have roughly 3,200 teachers. We feel we have the best teachers in the state. And really this budget is a statement of the values that we have as a school district. When we look at what our teachers are expected to do when they come out of college, it is to teach. It's to teach the content, whether it's math, English, science, social studies, elementary, middle, or high. What we see is obviously we want to make sure we address that. We've done that within the budget from the standpoint of proposed pay increase for them. But you know, there's another element to the work that they do, and the reality is, you know, so many children are coming with different challenges and unique situations that they're experiencing every single day. And so this budget would allow us to support those areas as well, in particular mental health, social, emotionally, making sure whether it's counselors or social workers, we have those things in place. It is a comprehensive budget. And so you see a lot of investment in what we call future-ready students, so roughly $10 million for advanced coursework, making sure we address reading levels and such.
Sheriff, your resource officers are in our schools every day. What do they share with you about the relationships that they develop with faculty, with staff, and particularly with students? And do they feel that if there were additional resources like some of the counselors that it's talked about, how would that help them in doing their jobs in the schools?
Thank you, Tom, for moderating this. The SROs we treat them a lot like we do a SWAT team. You don't just put somebody there. They have to be interviewed, they have to be vetted. It has to be someone who has a love for kids and somebody who wants to help. The SRO is also not just a cop in the halls. They're there for a variety of reasons. The discipline still remains the prerogative of the principal. The SRO would interfere only if there's a crime committed that they have to deal with that. But they're there as a counselor. They monitor the kids. They become a mentor to a lot of kids. And they will tell you right off the top that the tools they need for their toolbox to work with these young people is to encourage these young people in the areas they see deficiency. They almost act like a counselor. They would like to see more school counselors. I think the superintendent is talking about having what we used to refer to as a truant officer, more of those positions this year. That's a great thing. When I started my career many years ago at Juvenile Court, we had truant officers. And just home on the street and see that they were in school. I think that would be a tag team in terms of helping both the school and the officers, because eventually these kids are going to get on the street. And I need to know that we're not only teaching them what we need to teach them, but we can see that they're going to be productive citizens when they get out on the street, so that I don't have to deal with them in my jail.
So Judge, you've got any number of children that you see every day you show up to work. You have to hear a case, you have to sort of try to help get them on some path, and many times you're sort of, having to say, you're going to have to sort of pay for what you did. So when you think about that, what kind of advice do you share with these children? What kind of advice do you share with their parents? And then, are there a couple of ideas that you say, if I'm talking to teachers, this is how you can be helpful at that beginning point where you see this child, and here's what I can do as a juvenile court judge in trying to help get these kids back on the right path.
Wow. So, what I say in court to those children, those usually teenagers who have to appear in front of me and get, because they're in some serious trouble, I realize it has some limited impact on them. But nevertheless, I also realize that being in front of a judge should be a monumental experience for that child, a monumental moment in that child's life. And so I try to have a steady, serious hand while encouraging, of course, positive behaviors and productive endeavors. But I realize how limited we are within those four walls and how little we can actually do beyond those words. I realize how important it is for us to try to find out what really lies below the surface, what's going on in this child's life, what are the real issues, who's in charge of this child, 24 hours a day, or is the teenager, left to fend or managing his or her own self most of the day, and then that we have to rely on others who are in this child's life, the schools, the SROs, the rec center managers, the organizations, the churches and organizations that are hands-on working with these children every afternoon, every evening, every day, and so we rely heavily on that and of course try to encourage the child to look beyond the horizon and realize that they have a great potential future.
So Don, before I come to you, I want to read something that sort of sets this up. And this article appeared last week. The number one concern that Tennessee's new education chief, our Commissioner of Education, heard during her statewide listening tour. Without a question, it's the number one piece of feedback I heard from every single group. Penny Schwinn, the Commissioner of Education, said, there's a growing concern about how we can support our children, not only academically, but also behaviorally. Student mental health, an issue that has received a lot of lip service in Tennessee in recent years, but little in the way of funding, is one of the 12 priorities identified by the State Education Department's proposed 5-year strategic plan. And I'll quote, we have an increasing number of children living in predominantly low-income communities, but also coming from environments of addiction and abuse. We're seeing upticks in suicide rates and bullying behaviors, she said. So Don, you're here, you're the CEO of this institution. You interact with
in our emergency room when the infrastructure has failed. So what we have seen over the last few years is a steady rise in the rate of behavioral health issues to the point where a parent feels they have to bring this child to an emergency room. So it's crisis time then. It has gotten so bad that I met 2 weeks ago with every CEO from every children's hospital in the state of Tennessee, because we also have identified mental health as our #1 concern in healthcare for kids today. I support what's going on in the school system and what they're trying to add, because that's really where it starts. Tom, I do have a few slides if you'd like to see those now.
Yep.
Sure. So I brought some facts and data that I want to share with you. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in young people. That should be a shocking statistic by itself. But we also know that if we can get to these kids earlier, we can help them. All right, so the way you get to them earlier is you identify them when they're in the school system before they get to the hospital. These students with these mental health conditions are very likely to drop out of school. Many of these kids never make it to post-secondary education. And if you look at your juvenile justice system, these are the same kids that are there. So if we can identify these kids early, we can make a difference. This, again, should shock you. Tennessee ranks 50th in the nation for the rate of youth in major depression who did not receive mental health treatment. All right? Mental health treatment doesn't start at a hospital. It starts with the school. It starts with the professionals that are in the school budget to help them take care of it. We can do better than this is. We know this treatment works. 81% of teens get better with this treatment, whether it's anxiety or depression or ADHD. We can take care of these problems, and I think what we lack today is the infrastructure to do so. The #1 reason we lack infrastructure is an inability to fund it. So I think that's what we're here to talk about today. And we're in this beautiful outpatient center that was funded by our community. I think it's time that we think about how we fund education and bring it up to the same level. Now, these are some statistics from here. So this is our hospital, Children's Hospital in Erlanger, right here in Hamilton County. These are the number of behavioral health patients by month that came through, all right? What you don't see in this slide is the summertime, and I didn't put that in there because we didn't collect data over the summer yet. But what I can tell you, when I look at national data and I look at state data, there's a correlation between when kids are in school and when they have behavioral issues and when they attempt suicide. So the slide you see up here now is admissions and transfers. These are the number of kids who were severe enough that they had to be admitted to an inpatient facility to take care of them for their behavioral health issues. 73% of these kids were suicidal ideations. These are kids who not only thought about suicide, they were thinking about how to attempt to do it. This is a model that was proposed by the Tennessee Department of Education, and really, if you just look at it in the big picture, it starts at the very beginning with Tier 1. Tier 1 is in the school system, it's in our community. We can hire child psychiatrists to be the point of the tip, but what we need is a workforce out there that's trained to take care of these children, to identify the problems early, so we don't end up in the same situation. I do think we have the right things that we can do. We know what to do, but we need the resources.
Thank you. So, Judge Phil, let me, you just, with those statistics, what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the children that we have with serious juvenile justice issues either have or likely need treatment, diagnosis, and treatment. I continue to be a squeaky wheel in Nashville for serious and correct juvenile justice rehabilitation. A lot of the things that came out of Nashville last year with the reforms were maybe well-meaning, just don't do what we need, what these children need, these teenagers need to be effectively rehabilitated, where they can go back to school, be productive, come back in the community, be safe, and not be a danger to themselves or to the community. And therefore, because of the state's lack of, I believe, falling short in that area, it puts more and more emphasis on us here locally to handle that here, using the resources we have, both while they're at school and as I spoke about a minute ago, in the community, accessing professionals to try to keep those children, keep them out of juvenile justice custody. I think you didn't ask this question particularly, but I think it's important for this group to realize, and I think most of them do, at any given time, we have about 340 to 360 children, Hammond County children, in foster care through no fault of their own because of parenting issues. Those numbers are down some over the last few years, but still. And we have about 40 to 50 juveniles who are in juvenile justice because of their own actions. But Tennessee, when we commit a child to juvenile justice, they go into the custody of DCS, state of Tennessee, and they're coming back to us sooner. They're coming back to us quicker. They're coming back to us with less rehabilitation than they were getting before, which puts more emphasis on what we have to do here locally. And Dr. Johnson gets them back when they do come back into the community.
So Brian, you've heard Don's statistics, you've heard Judge Filion talk about what he's facing as a judge, and this is part of your budget, these positions. Why did you all say and decide these need to be or needs to be part of what we're doing in schools? These are not central office people, correct? These are people going to be in schools. So can you sort of build off of what they've shared?
Well, absolutely. So for us, when we construct a budget, it's not a group of 5 or 6 people sitting around a room building a budget. Again, I said earlier, our budget statement of what we value. We value our teachers, our leaders, our students, and our community. And so what we did is we went out into the community. We had listening sessions, and mental health was a theme. We have a student advisory group that meets on a monthly basis with myself directly, and we heard mental health as a theme. We met with our parent group in each learning community. We heard that as a theme. We meet with our teachers and our leaders. We heard mental health as a theme. And so when you look at our budget is reflective of what we've heard and learned from our community, and obviously with a keen ear to those that are in the trenches. And when we have teachers and leaders that are, taught to teach math, English, science, and social studies, it can't get that content across for a multitude of reasons. We have to address that. One point I would make, Tom, to be abundantly clear in regards to this mental health component is that it's not just something that we see in schools that are stricken with poverty. We see this permeate our school district, and so it doesn't matter what part of our county you're in, mental health is hitting every single area, and so this is addressing a need, and I'd give a little bit finer point to what we're looking at. For us, our elementary ratio counselor to student is 1 to 700. The national standard is to be 1 to 250. This budget proposal would allow us to get to 1 to 500. Social workers were at 1 to 3,000. The national average is 1 to. This budget proposal would allow us to get to 1 to 1,500. And so we're not even at the national average. This just gets us a little bit closer to, so that we can support students across this county.
So Dave, I'm going to read part of what you wrote in your opinion piece about a week or so ago. Hamilton County Department of Education's Exceptional Education Department is working to solve the disproportionately problem and the inclusion problem involving students with disabilities. Hamilton County was segregating students within the few schools that had special enclosed classrooms. Research shows, though, that students who have more access to the general education curriculum and more access to their typical developing peers demonstrate higher math and reading scores, less disruptive behavior, fewer absences, and better outcomes after high school. You know this area. You are executive director of an autism group here in Chattanooga. Talk to us about this issue, what you've seen up to date as you brought it here, and where should it go in the future?
All right, I just want to say thank you for having me. And I'm not just here on behalf of the Chattanooga Autism Center. I also represent several other nonprofits that work with kids with other disabilities, Down syndrome, epilepsy, and so on. I want to speak to the inclusion part first. Many years ago, these families and groups would work together to try to explain to the school we need more access to the general education population. This will decrease problem behaviors. It'll increase scores not just for kids with disabilities, but the general ed population. All of the research shows that. And we kept hitting a brick wall. Leadership changed, and we were asked to come back and try again. And that's when we were met with open arms, people who also understand the research behind this. And they allowed all of us to propose evidence-based solutions for increasing increasing access to the general ed population, or general ed curriculum, right? This takes a lot of time and thought. You can't just snap your fingers and everybody has inclusive, well, I guess you could. You could just tell all the kids, all right, now you're in a gen ed classroom. That was a fail. You have to have things in place, and that includes better trained teachers. You need more access to assistants and more assistants to be available so that co-teaching can happen. And so behavior issues that arise in a classroom can be dealt with in the same environment where learning is taking place. And when you do that, you see all learning rise on both groups, the kids with disabilities and the kids without. And you also see behavior problems decrease. And as a couple of people mentioned later on, we're not just looking at these kids now, we're looking at what happens when they leave the school system. And with this approach, more access to your typical developing peers, you are more likely to have employment or be ready for employment or be ready for college, be ready to live independently after you leave the school system. All of this can be done in the school system, but it takes effort, it takes money.
So Sheriff, I'm going to change in a different course here in just a second, but before I do, I want to ask you one other thing. Working with the mayor and with the county commission, talk about safety and security in our schools. Should parents feel better when their child leaves home, goes to school, that they're going to come back at the end of the day?
Tom, I do a lot of the neighborhood watch programs where I get right down where these parents live. We go out to their cul-de-sacs and their homes and their garages, and almost always one of the first questions I get is, why can we not have an SRO in every school? And they're costly, as we know. To take one officer and train him and put him out on the streets, about $100,000 for the first year. It does drop a little bit from there. But they also tell you that one of the reasons they come to a county like Hamilton is they want to be sure that when their child leaves home, where they don't have command control, I always say over them at that point, and I'm not sure we ever do when they're teenagers, but they want to know that they're in a school where there is an SRO, that's not, as I said, just a policeman there, but it's somebody who interacts with their children in a very positive way. That's a big part for a family to know that in school. I think it provides a more wholesome learning atmosphere when that SRO is there, because they are talking to young people. The young people, believe it or not, confide in officers a lot. We gather a lot of intel through what may be going on in the drug world or the gang world by these young people. So parents see that as something that they want to make sure is part of where their child's going to school.
So Mayor, I said we're going to sort of change in a different direction now, so here we go. When you look at the high percentage of Hamilton County children that come out of our public schools, you also see the economic future of our community as well. So what do students need to succeed, and how do we help when we look at today's investment, that is really an investment for tomorrow in this community, that it's not just one time, but it really has a ripple effect over years.
Again, thank you for the question. What we know from employers here in Hamilton County, they are constantly asking about the workforce. I mean, we're kind of a victim of our own success in that we got about a 2.6% unemployment rate right now, so they're constantly looking for additional workers, and for that workforce, that's what our school system provides for us, is the future. And what I really am excited about in this budget is the fact that there's something in there for everyone. There's something in there for the well-achieving students that are doing well to get them post-secondary ready to be part of our workforce. There's something in there for the underachieving students that are trying to get to read at grade level. And then there's something in between, whether they're going to get a certificate and go directly into the workforce. This is what really excites me about this. We've been hearing from the experts about the mental health issues. Dr. Johnson in our school system doesn't have the option of whether or not they're going to take students. They have to take everyone. That makes the system more expensive to be able to do that. It's not like our private schools, and we love our private school system here, as well as our homeschoolers. But again, in the public schools, and what we're here to talk about, that's what drives that cost, is the fact that he has to take everyone, and we have to prepare all of our young people to be productive in the community. And the way we do that is through education. And we're excited about this budget and opportunity to help everyone in the system. And too much criticism, I think, about throwing money at the same old problem. This is not in any way doing that. As you can tell, he's reaching out to every bit of the different, it's a wide spectrum of people that are being addressed in this budget.
So as I ask these questions, anybody else on the panel wants to come in, please do. So,
Well, just,
Yes.
if I could just piggyback that, for so many of the children we see, I don't think they have a really good idea of what's really out there. Because of their limited exposure to areas outside of where they live and their neighborhood or part of the county they're in. You know, they see police officers, they see firefighters, they see teachers, fast food workers, but they don't have a really good idea that the world is a huge place with all kinds of opportunities out there. And it makes it even harder for them to realize that they can exceed their horizon and do great things. But again, the fundamental, and I stress this to kids who do have to appear in front of me. I mean, you know, three things. You know, the kids, the children that are struggling, you know, if they can keep their criminal record clean, and that's the reason we have a juvenile court, keep their criminal record clean, get a high school diploma, and have some sort of progressive resume work history, they can do anything they want to do, and realize that they can do better than their parents did. I think that's, for most parents, that's our goal. We want our children to do better than we did. But helping some of these children realize that is all of our jobs.
I just have one thing I'd like to add to that. I mean, I think it's really important, and I've said this numerous times, I do believe we're at a crossroads with our public education system today. And I say that because we have to ask ourselves as a community, as a county, are we pleased with where we are with public education? I mean, I think that's the fundamental question we all have to ask ourselves. And I will say, and I've had the privilege to work really closely the last 18 months with Dr. Johnson, and we're going to see improvements in scores. We're going to see improvements in a number of areas that they've done and some of the things they want to do to address the classroom discipline issues. But you can only do so much, and he's done all that he can do. And the ones of us that look at this every day with them, so additional resources are needed to be able to take it to the next level. And I think that's what the citizens of this county expect us to do as leaders. They expect us to take it to another level, and in order to do that, it takes resources.
and so Dr. Johnson, I don't want you to be surprised, but I'm going to take this question and not go to you first with it. The mayor, you know, we talked about preparing the workforce in the future. And the mayor talked about getting the community involved, you know, to support it. Future Ready Institutes, new concept, interesting concept. Did you see that, Mayor, as sort of a new outreach to get business involved and get more closely involved, not only with schools, but with students and with a professional path?
Well, absolutely, and we really applaud the school system, certainly Dr. Johnson, for implementing this Future Readies program. What it does, again, it provides our young people an opportunity to be exposed to some of the professions that are out there. And some of these are needed professions, such as, you know, our trades, carpentry, and things of that nature. So we're really excited to see that. I think it's going to provide opportunities for our young people that are not interested in post-secondary. But guess what? It also addresses some of the needs of people that are interested in post-secondary to expose them to things that I'm sure Mr. Miller's interested in is healthcare. So, I mean, again, what our school system is taking on now is something that there's something for everyone that's in the system. And for the first time, what we see is all of our high schools are going to have an opportunity, and this is Dr. Johnson's thing here, but they're going to all be exposed to post-secondary opportunities, whether it's dual enrollment or whatever, but also the certification programs. And so that should excite all of us here in Hammond.
And Don, here at Erlanger, you all, you know, are one of the companies that's involved in one. Can you share a little bit more too about what it's like being involved in one of the Future Ready schools?
You know, absolutely. I think what I would start with is Dr. Johnson had a vision. A vision without a plan and implementation is a hallucination. So what we have happening now is Erlanger has partnered with Chattanooga State and the Hamilton County School Systems to set up an Erlanger Health Institute at Howard High School. First freshman class has 38 children in it, young adults who are expressing a desire to be in healthcare. That's our healthcare workforce of the future. I spent all morning talking about the need for sleep technologists and nurses and genetics counselors and how can we hire these people because the workforce just isn't available. So I'm very proud of Erlanger for stepping out front. I'm proud of the vision Dr. Johnson had to bring this idea to us. This is our workforce of the future. This is not a pipe dream. This is kids that are working towards their degrees in healthcare that will help staff our emergency rooms in our hospital.
So now, Mr. Superintendent, I will give you a chance to get your mic, but I thought it was good to set this up, and then here's what I want to ask you. We've heard on a couple occasions from Mayor Coppinger about, rather than single path, which was here in this community years ago, you're now on what I'll say multiple paths. So there are some students that clearly are interested in going immediately to the workforce, so we see some of that in future ready. There are those students who are looking to go on post-secondary. And you're setting them up, and some of those want to go post-secondary, as you and I have talked, still need some additional learning to be prepared when they go in. So talk about now what I'm going to call multiple approaches that are offered for students in this community, to help them figure out where they want to go and what the opportunities are and how to have the educational support to be successful.
Absolutely. So I think Don almost called Howard Howard University. That was sounding pretty good.
I am from D.C.
So we'll take it. So the reality is we want students to be able to access every opportunity and to understand the entry and exit points for the particular career field in which they're interested in. And so we get as excited about Marie Holland, that is a graduate of Sequoia, that now has a full-time job at Heat Tech, earning $20 an hour plus as a welder, as we do with Xavier Chavez, that's on full scholarship or will be on full scholarship at Harvard. And so we want students to understand every access point. We want them to understand a couple other things. Obviously, one, their interest, and then two, where are the jobs? And so when we talk about a graduation rate, it's a single indicator. You can have a 100% graduation rate and a 100% post-secondary failure rate, and so we want to make sure that our students not only graduate, but they graduate to something that will provide unto them a career that they're extremely as informed as possible about what all those options are.
So I'm going to stay with you and ask you this. So if you look at what you proposed in your budget, there are questions people have, well, how much of this is really in the classroom, in that school? So here's my question for you. What is the support that you see, your team sees, that a classroom teacher needs to be able to do what they're there to do?
Absolutely. So every classroom, as one classroom teacher myself, every classroom starts with the learning environment. And so if the learning environment isn't suitable for learning, it doesn't matter from a teaching standpoint how skilled you are, it will all fail. And so what we see is that the learning environment is the most critical component, and there's resources for the learning environment, whether it be the counselor, whether it be the social worker, et cetera. But then also, one of our focus areas is accelerating student achievement. And so what we do from the standpoint of professional learning and development for our teachers is important to make sure that they can master the state standards. Make no mistake that is a focus for us, and that our students are successful on the state assessment. And so we want to continue to strengthen those areas as we did this past year, and as we'll do the years to go forward. We want to make sure that our students and our teachers are prepared to be successful within the classroom. And so, this budget, we have roughly 354 positions in the budget. 295 of them are directly in the school. Of that difference there, another 15 or so are in technology. And so the reality is our school system has spent about 1% of our budget on technology. The national standard, according to the Council for City Schools, spend 2% of your budget on technology. And here's where the rubber meets the road while we're investing in technology. In the state of Tennessee, in the area of STEM, over the course of the next 10 years, there will be 42,000 jobs in the field with a salary at a median of $62,000 a year. So when we talk about future ready, how can we not invest in technology access for our students and for our teachers and be preparing students for future ready? So within our budget, within what we'll do, every student in grades 6 through 12 will have a laptop, will have a Chromebook, have a device that they'll go home with every single day and be able to access the resources that are available from the school.
So Sheriff, you've been in public service for some time, and you see changes you have to make as a sheriff with the services you provide, that your officers provide. So if we take that model, what you've seen, and you look at the school system, does it also sort of need to change with times? I mean, different environment today for kids growing up than, say, when I was growing up. How do we look at that and say, you got to be flexible enough to make sure that you're doing the things that support where we are today, not just holding on things that we might have done in the past?
I think you're exactly right on that. I think we have to be more proactive in preparing these kids for tomorrow. One thing I wanted to comment on when we were talking about the future-ready schools, I spent 3 years living in the Middle East while I was training the police over there, and I noticed in the school system over there how much more engaged families are with the education of their children personally. I was shocked the first time an Arab gentleman asked if his son could shadow me at the job I had over there, and I found that a little strange, and I talked to one of the locals there who was very familiar with it, and they said, oh, no, every father will take his son to a businessman and say, would you let my son spend the day with you, or my daughter? Because it's all about letting them learn what's out there. I've experienced that a few times as sheriff, where people would call me and say, will you mind if my child shadows you? And out of that, you can almost see throughout the course of the day and really start to engage in this particular profession that they're looking at. And we have actually recruited some young people to do that. The second part I would say is that as sheriff, I begin to look at more programs that would be proactive in helping people keep you from coming back to the jail. And that is, let's face it, a good portion of our inmate population are fairly young. They're not in high school necessarily. One thing I did is I went to the schools and started saying, listen, if you want a job in law enforcement, we will start you at 18. Now, you can't carry a weapon, but you can work in the jail. And if we can take a young person and give them a rifle and send them to Afghanistan, we can certainly help them learn at an earlier age how to be a productive citizen. That also has the benefit of them not waiting for several years and getting in trouble before they get into perhaps law enforcement as they want a career. But I'm particularly interested in programs that we can do in the jail to begin to show people how they can get a vocational position. I have employers who'll tell me, if you'll get them to the job, I'll give them a job, then go back to jail at night. And there's a certain class of people we can do that with. The mental health piece is extremely important. I'm operating under the FUSE program now, which is wraparound services to help me reduce the number of people we have locked up in the jail. But one of the most shocking figures that I like to give to audiences, it's right at $100,000 every 24 hours to run the jail. $100,000 every 24 hours. If we could reduce just the mental health population, it really has no business being in my jail. We think it's somewhere near 40%. Imagine that money available for schools, building schools, new programs. So yeah, I think we have to be a lot more proactive no matter what our discipline, law enforcement included.
So in 2017, when the millage rate was increased here, those funds went for capital construction. We're not talking about that in this budget, I know. So you've got a study going on right now, Dr. Johnson. Can you talk about what do you expect? I'll use this phrase, how do you right size our school system? Meaning the number of buildings we ought to have, there will be disruptions. We'll probably get a little bit away from what I know growing up here as community type schools. But so talk about that part of what you're looking at, and as you've made your budget and your projections and the income that you feel you need, how does that right sizing fit into it?
Yeah, great question, Tom. I'd start by saying this, that the facility challenges that we experience right now didn't start right now. You've got years and years and years of deferred maintenance, and you compound that with the growth that we're experiencing in some areas of our community, particularly districts 4, 7, and 9 of downtown Ooltewah and East Brainerd. it puts a challenge on our district. So, one of the things we haven't been afraid of doing as a school system, and sometimes know that it's not always embraced, is deferring to expertise. When you talk about high reliability organizations such as hospitals, what you do is you bring in an expert. If the doctor is an expert in sinus and allergy, you go to a specialist that deals with that. And so we brought in a specialist that deals strictly with buildings and complex school systems that have complex challenges. And so, the number in regards to deferred maintenance in 1999 was $200 million. We expect that number is going to be significantly above that. Also, the reality is you're not going to fix that in a year or 2 years or maybe even 10 or 15. It's going to take a lot of discipline and a very methodical approach. But I think you're exactly right when you say we have the right size. We're about 7.5 million square feet of real estate in Hamilton County schools. We have spent less than $1 per square foot on deferred maintenance. The national standard, according to the Council of Great City Schools, is to spend roughly $3 per square foot, and so we're spending about $3 million, or budgeted about $3 million. We should be spending about 22.5. This year, see Brent and Nakia here on our team, we have in this budget proposal proposed 15.1 million be added to that 3 million to get us closer to that 22.5. But you're exactly right in that we're going to have the right size, and really it's going to be a conversation about what we value. And when I look at learning environments, that's where the rubber meets the road. What do we value? What type of learning environment do we want our students to have access to? And so we anticipate very late July or early August that report being back and having a understanding and beginning a really strong development of a roadmap that will carry this district forward over the next decade.
When that report gets back, you plan to share it with the public, correct?
Absolutely. So we won't be able to solve that problem internally. And so we will need external support, to make sure that we address all of the areas. And just to let the public know exactly what is happening with the state of our facilities and what we are intending to do about it.
Before we open up for some media questions, the great thing about being a moderator is I get to sort of look at the questions I'd like to ask you all. I know I haven't necessarily covered what you want to ask, so I'm going to go around real quick. And Dave, I want to start with you. What is one or two things that you came here today want to share that I didn't ask you?
Sure. I want to talk about the teachers. We haven't really addressed that here. The teachers are the ones that are going to make all of these goals happen. And the ones I get to talk to, I have the privilege of having come to us either for advice or for training. They are the ones that want more professional development. They want to know how to make these things work, not just working with kids with disabilities, but also helping with equity, helping with disproportionality. They are craving that training. And to get that, you're going to have to add more days and more time. And the community is helping with this. And internally, they're helping with this. But you have to expand the ability to do that, number one. Number two is there are some star schools out there, and there's some star teachers that are doing some great stuff, helping get kids more access to the general ed population. What isn't fair is if not all the schools can do that. If there's 1 out of 10 schools that's doing a good job and everybody has to go to that school and you are sequestered and segregated to that school, that can't happen for many different reasons, morally, legally, and so on. So to make this equitable, all of the schools need to be ready to take all of their kids so they can have access to a general education, or a fair education. And to do that, we're going to have to put some more people in place. I know that this budget has 10 new special education teachers and I believe 30 assistants for these classrooms. That's what it's going to take. Actually, they could use a lot more, but they're moving some people around, they're doing it smart, and this is going to make that happen. It's going to make it successful. So those are the two things I wanted to address.
Don?
For me, a lot of this comes back to finance, and it's a good investment to invest in kids early. I believe the school budget helps identify areas that will help the children, help their health, but it's also good for the economic indicators of our city. I think the one thing I want everybody to walk away knowing is that this suicide issue is real. This behavioral health issue is real. Quoting back some statistics I saw last week from the Department of Education in Tennessee, we have a situation where more than 30% of our high school students are reporting that they have been significant to the point where it doesn't go away. You've got greater than 15% that says they've come up with a suicide plan. You got 8.3% said they tried. 8.3% tried. It's real. This is not just something out there. I will also tell you, it's correlated with school. When kids aren't in school, they're not showing up in our emergency rooms for suicide, all right? I can't tell you why. I don't know what the issues are. I know it's multifactorial. Could be pressure from school, could be academic performance, could be social media. But the reality is school is the place where kids are, and that's where these bad things are starting to happen. With the resources, we can identify these kids and get them the help they need.
Sheriff?
I would concur with Don there, especially in this suicide. One of the roles I have is that I get a text every time there's a suicide somewhere in this county, and they happen a lot more than people think they do. It is a major problem that we need to deal with, and it's a critical age, especially for teenagers when they're going through just the troubles of growing up you have to deal with. Secondly, I would say that it's very expensive to invest in education, and yet it's more expensive not to invest in it. We see those who do not get a proper education, be it college or vocational, then we end up, in many cases, unfortunately, I have to deal with them at the criminal justice level.
Your copy.
Well, I would hope the takeaway would be that this is not money that's being used and utilized the way that it had been in the past. This is something new. I've been in this community my entire life, and I'm not a person that's a fan of taxes, and I'm a very fiscal conservative person, and I hope somewhere along the line we built some trust with the public. And I say that because what we're trying to accomplish in this budget is something we haven't done in the past as it relates to putting money into the classroom in every different area. You were talking about earlier about this report that's going to come back. It will be substantial. We understand that. But we got the opportunity now to take care of the classroom issues where the students are going to get a chance for the future. The buildings are wonderful. We just spent over $100 million in 2017, and we had an 8-to-1 vote to do that, to spend that money. Now what we're trying to do is invest in the students, not in the buildings, not anything material, but something that this community for many, many decades is going to get a return on that investment by these young people, these students that are in our public schools, are contributing in a positive way in our community. And I think that's extremely important for the public to realize is that this is not business as usual, or I wouldn't be out here on this limb as far as I am. This is not business as usual. It's totally different. He's put together a plan where he's shown a 5-year strategic plan that should excite everyone in this county. He's tightened the belts in the school system, saving money, and he's shown that he is a good steward of the money, as has the school board. So I think it's time to trust, and it's time to move forward.
Dr. Johnson.
I think the only thing I'd add really is twofold. One, this is about being excellent. This is about our school district being all that everybody says we want it to be. And this is a moment in time where our actions can match our beliefs. And then I think the other thing is it is aspirational, the investment. And so I always talk about my children. When I invest in them as they currently are, I'm investing in what they'll become, not what they currently are. And so I always joke and say if I was investing in them based on what they currently are, they wouldn't be getting very much. But the reality is I want them to be great. And so because I want them to be great, I invest in them. And that's what we have the opportunity to do for 44,000 children. Candidly speaking, I get the privilege of being the voice of 44,000 children. This is a children-based budget. This budget is about the future of Hamilton County. And so I think it's an important moment.
Judge Filio.
Thank you, Don, for bringing those numbers to us. That's the world that I live in the world I work in every day, and also the juvenile justice part. You know, it's ever more important that we find ways to locally deal with these children. The state's not going to do it for us. We've got to do it in our schools and in our community, and foundationally, in its most basic form, we've got to keep these kids that I'm referring to in school better than we have in the past. That's the bottom line, and that's why I agreed to be here today.
So Now I'm going to turn to the media that's here. Since we're live streaming, I'm going to repeat your question, so please don't be offended when I do if I don't say exactly how you ask it, but I will promise you I'll get the point. So who's got a question they'd like to ask? Anybody on the panel? Oh my gosh, we have, yes.
Well, I guess, since you all mentioned suicide and how that's a problem, do you think that it's necessary then to have counselors and everything in schools to help these students, or what can be done to kind of solve this problem?
So the question is about the suicide issue that's been brought up here today, and is it necessary to have counselors in the schools to solve this problem, or the other things to do? Don, you want to start?
I would say absolutely it's important. Counselors get to know these kids. They get to recognize problems. They get sent to the counselor when there are issues, whether behavioral issues or other academic issues. The reality is by the time a kid gets to us, they've already failed. And they're in deep trouble. And last year, 73% of the kids we admitted for behavioral health were for suicides, suicide attempts or suicidal ideation. If we could catch these kids early on, before all of this compounded on them, we can stop that process. We can intervene in that process. Counselors need to do this in the schools. That's where it's most cost effective, and that's where it's best for kids. So absolutely.
If I could say a little opinion to give it maybe a little finer point, times have changed, and I think if we don't acknowledge time have changed for children, as a parent of two children that are school age or recently one finished, times have changed, and there's this little thing called social media that has created a whole new realm of challenge for students and what they experience. And so the more we can support kids with understanding how to deal with the challenges that they experience, the savviness to be able to deal with some of the challenges they experience from the standpoint of technology and social media, the better. So we're dealing with a societal challenge, but they come to school every single day, and we know we have to teach them. So
on those school systems that have the much lower ratio of the counselors per student, do they have suicide rates that are commensurate with those counselors?
So the question is for those, the statistics that Dr. Johnson pointed out earlier, where the numbers nationally are lower than what you're projecting you would move to with these changes, are their rates lower when you talk about suicides? What's the real impact of having more counselors?
So I would also defer to Don from the suicide context. I'd actually bring those numbers to fruition, because we don't like to talk suicide, even though we know it's a reality of what we deal with. Here's what I would say for our community. I think a good benchmark for us is Greenville, South Carolina. I think it's a great benchmark community. They had BMW came into their community, kind of similar to Volkswagen and some other things. In their most recent budget proposal, what they put forth was to be at the national standard of 1 to 250 for counselor to student ratio. And so again, our proposal, we're right now at 1 to 700 at the elementary level. We're trying to get to 1 to 500 and trying to make sure that the span of control for the adult is more controlled.
Expanding from suicide, this might be for sheriff or judge. Some who are against the tax increase say that schools are kind of overstepping their purpose. Expanding into the social emotional, expanding into attendance, discipline issues, even suicide and mental health. Is the schoolhouse a place where this should be handled, or what do you say to those in the community who don't think that the schoolhouse is where this should be handled?
So the question is, some of those who are against the proposed tax increase say that schools are expanding their reach into areas like social work, things of that nature. And so what do you say to those people who feel like you're overstepping? What should be done? Is that fair? Judge, you want to?
Well, I'll try to answer that question. We have a mandate to educate our children. These men at the head table have a mandate to educate. Dr. Johnson has a mandate to educate the children. That entails, I believe, so much more than it did 50 years ago. For one thing, basic morals and personal responsibility things are not being taught in the home like when we were young. And part of that may be because of social media, because everybody has their face in a phone, but there are a lot of reasons for that. Again, the bottom line is if we can't control behavior in the schoolhouse, then we can't teach them. If we can't teach them, we can't keep them in school, and I end up getting them, the sheriff ends up getting them. You know, Dr. Johnson, I've heard him make the point earlier that there are 24 hours a day, you know, 365 days a year, and the schools only have these children a fraction of that big time, and that's true. But at the same time, the schools do have them for 8 hours a day during the school year and have the most opportunity to be impactful in these areas.
So I think if you want to make a difference in a community, you have to go to the community to make the difference. Last week, I mentioned earlier, I met with the 5 CEOs from the 5 children's hospitals in Tennessee, with the Children's Hospital Association of Tennessee. We met with the head of Medicaid to say, we've seen this problem and rise in suicide rates. We're worried about it. It's our biggest issue. They're worried about it. They're worried about it enough. They brought Cigna and Blue Cross and AmeriGroup to meet with us to learn about this issue. We all agreed the solution isn't in the healthcare system. By the time the kids get to the healthcare system, it's failing. We need to get back out into the community. You need to go where kids are. All kids are in school. This is where that social support needs to start happening.
We have another question.
Yes, Dr. Buck, this would be for you, but you know, you spoke a little bit about integrated classrooms and how that helps a student, actually helps prepare them for life after graduation, and so they can be functioning members of society. You know, talk a little more about how that integrated classroom makes a difference in things.
So the question is about looking at integrated classrooms, meaning where you can provide services for those who have some additional learning needs. So, Dr. Buck, how do you look at that?
Right, we've got to look at all of the research that they've been doing for several decades on inclusion, we'll call it that, where it's evidence-based inclusion. And I should specify, that doesn't mean every single kid is in a general ed classroom all day long. What it is the access to as much of it that would be appropriate, or starting at that level. And at some point, if you need to have pullouts, you would get pulled out. And what happens is you have access to your typical developing peers. When you have access to your typical developing peers, you increase your social skills, you increase a circle of support. Watch this happen in the schools when you have friends around you who are typical developing, maybe have some strengths where you don't, but they support you. They're not teasing you. They're not bullying you. You're part of their group. Imagine what that can do to a person when it's time to go out into the world, get your own apartment, apply for a job when you've got those people around you. And we see that happen when inclusion takes place. Even if it's for a little bit, if it's for 3 hours or 4 hours a day, or sometimes 1 hour, or sometimes progressing up to when you're graduating, you are completely in the general ed classroom because of this support that you have around you. So just, you can imagine that yourselves. If you didn't have access to that, you would be struggling more than the rest of your community.
If I could say the academic piece as a former special educator, so there's a reality that for outside of about 1% of, just generally speaking, the special ed population, those students are assessed on the state assessment, right? And so the more you can expose them to Tier 1, we call it Tier 1 instruction, but the core standards, the more likely they are to be successful. And to his point, the more opportunity they have to be successful, the more likely they move on to full state.
So let me thank the panel today, and we'll go around again. Dr. Dave Buck, who is with the Chattanooga Autism Center's Executive Director, Don Mueller, who is the CEO of Children's Hospital of Erlanger, Sheriff Jim Hammond, County Mayor Jim Coppinger, Hamilton County Superintendent Brian Johnson, and Juvenile Judge Rob Filion. Thank you all, and thank you, the audience who are with us today, and those who have been listening to this live